Nix. It must be Sunday, aka True Crime Story Time. I hope you're all doing well. I've had a super busy week. It's been super manic, super busy. I'll give you a quick update before we get into today's episode. It's not good. So I am live tomorrow at 8 p.m. the UK time, and I have a brand new artist to release with brand new artwork coming to the store. I'm so very, very excited about all of that. New to the diamond painting world, didn't even know what it was, so I'm very, very excited. I want to give a big shout out to Diamond Painting with Jack. I came across, he tagged me. Luckily, I had no idea that he was a YouTuber based on the order. And I was tagged in an unboxing of Spring Forward. And we had a quick interaction on the video, and turns out he likes my true crime. So, hello, Jack. A big thank you. I do have Spring Forward myself, and it is absolutely gorgeous. So, awesome choice. Your cover minder has been posted, and it's on its way. So, what else have we got going on? There's so much coming, guys. So much coming. I have a new artist release set for tomorrow. The following Monday, I am releasing just one kit. It's a very, very special kit with a very, very special collaboration. So stay tuned for that as well. Okay, I think that's about all I really kind of wanted to say. A big shout out to Nick Stark Sky for having me on her Saturday Night Live, which is 1:00 Sunday morning for me. But I love hanging out with Nick's. So I showed some goodies there as well. And it's busy. And I like to be busy. I don't do boredom. It's something I always used to say. I'm sorry about the traffic. My windows are shut, and I live on a main road. So, super busy, super manic. I don't do boredom. That's what I was saying. I have actually forgot what boredom is. I have not been bored for a long time. Oh dear. So I am working on Leona from Shalayarius in my store. Again, so many wonderful things are happening. I am supporting Break the Silence, hence I'm doing Leona early. So she's a very popular kit for a Break the Silence event in October, which is Kokisha Warren. There is a Facebook group, Break the Silence 2023, I believe it is called. And I'm working on it early to get it done. I've also got the other featured painting, which is The Pain I Hide. I've got Still Vulnerable on the way, and one of the other ones, I can't remember which one I went for. It's either Finding Space or Finding Healing. I can't remember which one I ordered, because they're both gorgeous. So, it was the landscape I ordered. I went the other way. It's the landscape, because I don't have many landscapes, and that's mega purple. So, okay, let's get into today's true crime. This is not good. Okay, so please do grab your project, make sure you have a drink, and come join me. As always, I will discuss things throughout and have a quick chat at the end. Sunday evenings, listening to true crime. Yeah. Okay. In June 1984, Mabel Harrison drove along California State Route 89, northwest of Lake Tahoe. As the first hints of sunrise began to glow against the Sierra Nevada mountains, as she passed, I don't know how to say that, Squaw Valley Ski Resort, she saw bright yellow flashes through the trees on the side of the road. Something was burning. Curious, she stopped the car, climbed down the sloped roadside to get a closer look. What she saw horrified her. A body was burning on top of what seemed to be a makeshift funeral pyre. Mabel ran back to the highway and flagged down a trucker who used his CB radio to alert the Placer County Sheriff. When authorities arrived and extinguished the fire, they found the body of a young woman burning on top of a heap of clothing and miscellaneous personal items. The woman appeared to be about 20 years old. Her legs and arms were bound and duct tape covered her mouth. Her body was almost entirely charred. Her cheeks and the backs of her calves were the only parts of her body that hadn't burnt. In the heap beneath her body, investigators found pieces of clothing, jewellery and a toothbrush, but no identification at all. The body and the clothing had all been soaked with gasoline. Investigators were puzzled when disposable diapers were found at the scene. There was no sign of a baby, and an autopsy later revealed that the woman had never given birth. Further examinations of the body showed that the girl had been severely abused over a long period of time, and there was large puncture wounds on her back. However, neither the wound nor the abuse had killed her. The woman's lungs were filled with soot, indicating that she had been alive when she was set on fire, but it wasn't the fire that had killed her. She had died of smoke inhalation. Investigators searched dental records and examined what was left of her fingerprints, but there was simply no record of the girl. A composite drawing was created based on what was left of her face and released to the media, but months went by without any clues as to her identity. From that point forward, the girl was only known as Jane Doe, number 4858-84. 11 months later, just 6 miles from where the first Jane Doe was found, a man walking in the Martis Creek campground noticed a large box in some bushes not far from the road. When curiosity compelled him to open the box, he found the body of another young girl. Again, investigators found no identification at the scene, and no missing person reports matched her description. The second girl had died of dehydration and starvation. She, too, showed signs of severe abuse. The second girl became known as Jane Doe 6607-85. Although the bodies were found near each other, the second body was found across county lines in a different jurisdiction, and the two cases were not connected. It would be almost a decade before anyone would come forward with any information about these two murders. More than 8 years had passed since the two bodies were found, and 23-year-old Terri Knorr horrific secrets had eaten at her for as long as she could remember. She needed to tell someone, anyone that would listen. But when Terri told Utah police what she knew, they brushed her off. So did her therapist. It was an insane story. It couldn't possibly be true. In late October 1993, Terri called 1-800-CRIME TV, the phone number for the television show America's Most Wanted. She knew they would listen. The TV show operators put her in contact with detectives in Placer County, California, where the first body had been found. Finally, she found someone that took her seriously. Terri shared with detectives her lifetime of horrific abuse at the hands of her sadistic mother, which led to the death of her two sisters, Susan and Sheila Knorr. In less than a month after her phone call, the two Jane Does had positively been identified as her sisters, and authorities had arrested her two brothers and her mother, Teresa. Teresa was born Teresa Cross in 1946 to Jim and Swanee Cross. By her early teenage years, Teresa's father had developed Parkinson's disease and was no longer able to work, leaving her mother to raise the family. Teresa was very close to her mother. When she was just 15, however, while Teresa was buying groceries with her mother, Swanee Cross collapsed and died in her arms. Her mother's death hit Teresa hard. With her father unable to work, the family had no income and were forced to sell the home they had lived in. Teresa fell into a deep depression and grasped for anyone to love her. At just 16 years old, she dropped out of high school and married her first boyfriend, 21-year-old Clifford Sanders. 10 months after their wedding, Teresa gave birth to her first son, Howard. Their young marriage, however, was already having trouble. Teresa suffered relentless mood swings. One minute she would be kind and a loving wife, the next moment she was angry. She explained that Clifford drank far too much and was insistent that he was having sex with women that he met in bars. In June 1964, after Clifford spent a night out drinking with friends, Teresa berated him and he finally returned home. The argument that ensued resulted in Clifford punching her in the face. Teresa reported the assault to police but refused to press charges against her husband. Perhaps she had second thoughts or another plan. Less than a month later, Clifford spent his birthday out with friends rather than at home with Teresa, who was now pregnant with their second child. Early next morning, July 6, 1964, she confronted him and again accused him of infidelity. Clifford responded to the accusation by saying what had been on his mind for quite some time. He wanted a divorce. The news was more than she could take. Teresa flew into a jealous rage, grabbed a rifle and shot him as he walked out of the back door. Clifford had raised his hand to deflect the shot, but the bullet pierced his wrist, entered through his chest, and continued directly into his heart. It killed him instantly. At just 18, Teresa was charged with the murder of her husband. During her murder trial, Teresa testified that Clifford Sanders was an abusive alcoholic and she had killed him in self-defense. She cried as she told the court that she had grabbed the gun only intending to threaten him. She only wanted to stop hitting her. She claimed the gun had accidentally fired. Although there was no evidence of bruising or other signs of physical abuse on her body, as she had claimed, as well as an autopsy of Clifford's body that revealed there was no alcohol in his system at the time of his death. The jury couldn't say no to the poor, young, pregnant girl, and she was acquitted. After the trial, several of the jurors came up to her and hugged her, expressing their satisfaction that she was finally rid of, quote, that horrible man. The day after her acquittal, Teresa brazenly showed up at the district attorney's office, demanding they return the rifle that had been used as evidence against her. The following March, Teresa gave birth to her second child, Sheila, and began dating Robert Knorr, a Marine Corps private. Robert had done a tour in Vietnam where he was shot on 2 different occasions and also had a bridge blown up beneath him. The 3 incidents left him with severe injuries that had required several months of recovery in a military hospital. Within months of meeting Robert, Teresa was pregnant again. On the 9th of July in 1966, she and Robert were married. That September, she gave birth to her third child, Susan, and the couple had 2 more boys in quick succession, William and Robert Jr. Due to his injuries in Vietnam, Robert's subsequent job opportunities with the military were limited. Restricted to light duty, he was assigned as a funeral escort, which required travel all over the country. When young men returned from Vietnam in body bags, Robert was there to carry a casket or shoot a rifle into the air as part of a 21-gun salute. With her husband gone for several days at a time, it left Teresa home to take care of 5 children. Again, her imagination went wild. Like she did with the first husband, Teresa accused Robert of infidelity. As her anger festered, Teresa aimed her aggression at her children, abusing them physically, verbally, and psychologically. By late 1969, Teresa was pregnant for a 6th time, but her marriage with Robert was collapsing quickly. She was prone to frequent outbursts of anger and accusations, and Robert couldn't take another day of what was to become the onset of her borderline personality disorder. With Teresa 7 months pregnant, the 2 divorced in June 1970. 2 months after the divorce was finalised, Teresa gave birth to a girl, Terry. However, when Robert came to visit the children, she refused to allow him access. From that point on, Robert was no longer allowed to see his children. The following year, Teresa married once again. This time, however, the accusations of infidelity flew from both her and her new husband from the very beginning. They were divorced within a year. Teresa spent the next 4 years drinking at the American Legion Hall in Rio Linda, California, and often left her children home alone for days at a time. In August 1976, she met and married Chet Harris after having known each other for only 3 days. Chet was almost 30 years older than Teresa. Although she quickly grew to hate him, I'm beginning to see a pattern here. He and her daughter Susan grew close, which angered her even more. After less than 4 months of marriage, she was divorced once again. Now, I've actually lost count of how many times she's got married now. 4? The final divorce changed Teresa dramatically. She drank more and more, gained a tremendous amount of weight, and became increasingly antisocial. So much so that she got rid of the telephone, as she didn't want to speak to anyone and wouldn't even allow the children to have friends over. Unfortunately, the change that the children noticed most was at the level of abuse. To Teresa, the children were the spawn of the devil. Robert nor. So they deserved to be punished. As her level of drinking escalated, so too did her mania. She often threw kitchen knives or scissors at the children, and once put a gun to the head of her youngest daughter, Terry, as she threatened to kill her. Beatings occurred almost daily. The children were burned with cigarettes and force-fed to the point of vomiting. When they vomited, you can imagine, okay, she didn't clean it up. Yeah. Teresa ordered her children to hold the others down when it came time for a beating, with the boys often ordered to participate in the beating of their siblings or face a beating themselves. The girls received the bulk of the abuse, especially Susan. Teresa's delusions grew more and more insane. She truly believed her girls were demons. As Teresa got older, fatter and uglier, the young girls reaching their teenage years became more beautiful. Teresa, who had once been young, attractive, was convinced the girls had cast a spell on her. They were stealing her beauty and causing her to gain weight. Howard, the oldest son, was the lucky one. He managed to get away from the madness. He left home when the family moved to a run-down trailer park on Auburn Boulevard in Sacramento in 1983, just before the real insanity began. It gets worse. The new neighbourhood was known for seedy motels, street prostitution, heroin addicts and drug dealers. But even in a neighbourhood like that, the Knorr family stood out. Neighbours noticed that their 2-bedroom apartment smelled of urine and the children were rarely let outside of the house. In 1980, 15-year-old Susan was picked up on the streets of Sacramento. She had run away from home and was trying to survive as a prostitute. Susan was caught by a truancy officer and placed in a psychiatric hospital. In the hospital, she told of the extreme abuse that she had received from her mother. However, when authorities confronted her mother, Teresa denied any accusations of abuse. The other children backed up their mother's lie, knowing that they would be beaten if they didn't. And I totally get that. I mean, my abuse wasn't this horrific. Not on the same scale, I should say, but you close ranks. Because you're brainwashed into believing that you'd never be believed. And like I said in the beginning, she wasn't. My eyes are watering. Teresa assured authorities that Susan had mental problems and often made up crazy stories. Without further investigation, Susan was returned to the custody of her mother. Scared to death, Susan returned home and prepared for the worst. Teresa donned heavy leather gloves to protect her fists as she punished her daughter with a brutal beating. Susan's siblings were all ordered to take part in the beating as well, passing around the leather glove till they were covered in Susan's blood. For her defiance, Susan was handcuffed beneath the kitchen table, and the other children were ordered to watch over her to make sure she didn't escape. From that point on, none of the children ever went to school again. Teresa had told their previous school that they had moved out of the school district, but never bothered to enroll the children in a new school. Most of them never made it past 8th grade. Susan was kept secured under the table for the next 2 years. The gag in her mouth was only occasionally removed when her mother hand-fed her. When Susan rebelled, she was force-fed to the point of vomiting. Teresa, of course, made her eat that too. By 1982, Susan's will had broken and her mother removed her handcuffs. She was finally allowed to sleep with the other children. Despite her abuse, Susan was still the only child that had been brave enough to stand up to their mother, but her defiance continually made her a target. During an argument in June 1983, Teresa flew into a manic rage and ordered her sons to hold Susan still while she pulled out a gun and shot her daughter in the chest. Susan slumped and bled out on the floor, but she was still alive. Barely. The bullet had missed any vital organs, but had lodged in her spine. Teresa ordered the children to handcuff Susan and lay her in the bathtub, where she stayed for almost 2 months as her mother nursed her back to health. The children were ordered to tell no one. Miraculously, Susan recovered. When she was well enough, Susan begged her mother to let her leave the home to make a life on her own, and surprisingly, Teresa agreed. But her freedom would come with one stipulation. She needed to have the bullet in her spine removed. Teresa didn't want there to be any evidence that she had shot her daughter. In July 1984, Teresa prepared for an amateur surgery in the home. She gave Susan a heavy dose of, I don't even know how to say that, but it is a drug to treat schizophrenia, and a bottle of whiskey. Then had her lay on the kitchen table. The drug and the alcohol cocktail knocked Susan unconscious, and the surgery began. Teresa handed her son, Robert Jr., an X-Acto knife and ordered him to dig into her back to look for the bullet. Robert dug deep into his sister's back with the knife and probed with his fingers to find it and remove the bullet. The surgery was a success. But when Susan finally woke, her pain was excruciating. Teresa fed her antibiotics and ibuprofen, I can't say that either, to ease the pain, but they only seemed to make her condition worse. Within days, Susan's eyes had turned yellow and she was no longer able to control her bowels. Internal bleeding had caused massive black bruises on her back Susan then slipped into a coma. On July the 16th, 1984, Teresa filled plastic garbage bags with all of Susan's belongings, every piece of clothing she owned, every photo of her, anything that proved she ever existed, went into them garbage bags. She then ordered William and Robert Jr. to put a diaper on their sister, duct tape her mouth, and carry her to the trunk of the car. The family left Sacramento with Susan in the trunk and drove east until they reached Highway 89. They drove south through the night along Highway 89 and pulled over near the banks of Square Creek. Teresa carried the garbage bags with Susan's belongings to an area near the creek bed, while the boys carried their sister and laid her on top of the trash bags. Teresa then doused her daughter and her belongings with gasoline, lit a match, and walked away. It didn't take long before all the anger and insanity that had been directed at Susan was directed at Sheila. Teresa had been drawing unemployment but found a new way to supplement her income. She forced 20-year-old Sheila onto the streets into a life of prostitution. Life as a prostitute horrified Sheila, but it seemed to please Teresa. The money Sheila brought home was much more than her unemployment payments. As a result, Sheila was allowed to leave the house as she pleased for short periods of time and received fewer beatings. But by May 1985, everything changed. Teresa contracted a STD. Worse, she believed she caught it from using the toilet after Sheila. She also accused Sheila of allowing herself to get pregnant during her sex work. Sheila was gagged, her feet were bound, and her hands were tied behind her back. Teresa, William, and Robert Jr. beat Sheila within inches of her life. They then placed her into a small linen closet measuring only 16 inches by 24 inches. The shelving of the closet made it even smaller. There was only room for her to stand. She couldn't kneel, sit, or even turn around. Though the children could hear grunting and moans coming from the closet, they were strictly forbidden to open the door under any circumstances. No food, no water, no bathroom, nothing. When the noises coming from the closet got too loud, Teresa would just turn up the TV. After 3 days in the closet, the family heard a loud thud. Still, Teresa insisted that none of the children open the closet door. After another 3 days, however, the smell was too much to stand. When they opened the door, Sheila's decomposing body was curled up on the floor. She had died of starvation and dehydration. Teresa filled a large cardboard box with blankets, and the boys placed Sheila's body into the box. They then put the box in the trunk and again drove through the night towards Lake Tahoe. Teresa instructed the boys to dump the box next to some bushes near the bank of a small lake in Martis Creek campground. Just a few hours after they dumped her body, a man found the box and alerted police. For the next 3 months, the family could still smell the unmistakable odour of decomposition lingering in the house. They went back to the house. Teresa was convinced that the smell alone would implicate her in the death of her daughter. On September 29th, 1986, the family packed their belongings and moved out. However, 16-year-old Terry was ordered to go back to the apartment, douse it in lighter fluid, and set it on fire. She did as she was told, but the 3 containers of lighter fluid weren't enough to do much damage. Neighbours quickly called the fire department, and most of the apartment was left intact, including the closet where Sheila had died. Terry knew that she would be the next target to her mother's rage. Both her sisters had warned her, rather than go into hiding with her mother and brothers, Terry ran away. She had kept Sheila's identification card and spent the next several years posing as her sister. After leaving the Sacramento home, 24-year-old William also cut ties with his mother and moved in with his girlfriend. Robert Jr. stuck by his mother's side, and the two of them moved to Las Vegas. Robert Jr. and Teresa kept a low profile in Las Vegas for years, until November the 7th, 1991, when Robert attempted to rob a bar and ended up killing the bartender. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to 16 years in prison. Immediately after her son's arrest, Teresa moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, where she started using her maiden name and got a job as a caregiver to an elderly woman. Almost 9 years had passed since Sheila's death when Terry and her new husband decided to call the America's Most Wanted hotline. When Terry told police the horrific story, they revisited the evidence recovered from both the Jane Doe scenes. Fingerprints were lifted from the box in which Sheila's body had been discovered. The prints matched both William and Robert Jr. The box was traced back to a movie theatre where William had once worked. William was still living in the Sacramento area and worked in a warehouse when he was arrested. When questioned, he initially denied everything. However, when detectives laid out the evidence against him, his brother and his mother, he admitted his guilt. Robert Jr. was brought from his prison cell in Nevada back to California to face charges. He too denied, but later admitted his guilt. Teresa had been tracked down via a driver's license application she had filed in Utah. Just 5 days before her arrest, she had been arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol. When officers showed up at the address on her driver's license. She was already packing her bags, so she knew the police were looking for her. When questioned by detectives, she refused to cooperate and immediately requested legal counsel. Teresa was charged with 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, and 2 special circumstances charges, multiple murder and murder by torture. She initially pleaded not guilty, but later changed her plea when she was told that her son William was planning to testify against her. Her guilty plea eliminated the chance that she would be sentenced to death. I mean, why are we keeping her around? On October the 17th in 1995, Teresa Knorr was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences. She will be eligible for parole in 2027 at the age of 80. Although the boys had pleaded guilty, the circumstances of their involvement in the murders of their siblings were not cut and dry. Their lifetime of abuse and constant threat of further abuse clearly influenced their involvement. Well, let's just hold on a second, because yeah, I get it. I totally agree with that. However, they were, well, one of them was married and all of that. Why did he not go to the police and report her? Well, because he was in on it, I guess. Okay. For his role in the murders, William was sentenced to probation and ordered to undergo psychological therapy. Robert Jr. received an additional 3 years concurrent to his existing prison sentence for the bartender's murder. After his release from prison, Robert Jr. was arrested again in 2014 on multiple child pornography charges. He is due to be released in 2024. Terry the one that escaped and went to the police, died of a fatal heart attack in 2011. She was 31 years old. And there you go. Oh, I need a second because this is just... I have absolutely no words. I'm actually crying. That is definitely one of the world's worst mums. Wow. I have no words. I have tears rolling down my face for Terry. And of course Susan and Sheila too. Your own mum doing that. Wow. There you go, guys. I have no words. Please, as always, do leave your thoughts and comments down below. I actually do enjoy the interactions that we have on my true crime. This was one horrific, disgusting. Oh my gosh. She's almost on a par with Gertrude and the Sylvia Likens. She's almost on that par, but they were her own children. And she was so full of hate and anger. She took it out on kids. Wow. thank you so much for joining me for today's episode, guys. Yeah. What an absolutely horrific... I'd never heard of this lady. I didn't know about this case. I'm pretty sure that it might have been more out there in America than it probably did over here, but I definitely need a cup of tea. Thank you so much for joining me. If you made it to the end of this video, kudos. I struggled. I have no words. I can't do my usual. I'm just devastated and angry. I appreciate you tuning in. Thank you so much for coming back and checking out my true crime. I do appreciate it. And, bringing awareness of all of this is it's part of the mission as to why I do the true crime. My heart just breaks for those 3 girls. And the boys too, to a certain degree, but the fact that Robert's now completely lost in the system, yeah. I shall see you next week for another true crime. Please remember, I am live tomorrow with a brand new artist release with brand new artwork. Yeah. I shall see you then. Please do go and watch a comedy or find some way to kind of de-stress after listening to this, because it's a very, very horrific, brutal, disgusting true crime that I have covered tonight. I love you guys, and I shall see you live tomorrow. Bye.